ready? And we yes. People with the, you guys liking those?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah? It's nice, huh? Are you a journaler?
No, but it should be.
I'm not either, but I like doodling
Yeah.
notes and stuff.
Yeah.
I actually bought that.
If you guys missed the memo on this, this company, it's called Illuminate, but they basically do like individual copies of books of the Bible. And I had just recommended like these are kind of a cool way to read if you're just studying a book. And what they do is like it's got like cool artwork and stuff in it, but it's like half a page to read the book and then half a page to journal and do stuff. So you can see like
Were they like $5.99?
yeah, they're
less
super
than
cheap.
$7
Like you can see my little picture of Jesus from chapter 1 here I drew out.
Caleb's was
If you
better.
remember, yeah, Caleb's. So let me, by way of kind of reminder here, let's just go through our kind of summary of chapter 1, and then we'll do the summary of last week, well, 2 weeks ago, and then we'll get into it. Okay, so just if you're wondering, we are in chapters 4 and 5 tonight. That's our home base. Okay, so we said the chapter summary of chapter 1 was Jesus is God's faithful witness, and we talked about how faithfulness, that Greek word pistis, has to do with allegiance, and the word witness is where we get our word martyr from. So Jesus was he held his allegiance to God even to death on the cross. He's the ruler of the kings of the earth, although apparently it doesn't look that way. He's the firstborn from the dead, which is where we place our hope. Jesus' followers are going to be and are priests of his kingdom who serve and worship God the Father. And the intent, John says in his letter, is to further reveal, where it's where we get Apocalypse from, who Jesus is. And those who read and hear his message, those are going to be key words, read and hear, or hear and see, will be blessed. Those are promised blessing. Okay, so then we walked through the churches, and that was kind of some of the most practical stuff. And here was what we said for the summary of the churches, if you missed that one. Jesus wants his followers to have patience and endurance because they currently live in a persecuted setting. Something that we kind of struggle to understand. He calls us to suffer even when it means to our death. We are to have faith as we love and serve one another. Jesus calls his church to repentance, to flee sexual immorality and alternate forms of worship. His desire is that we be on fire for his kingdom. Jesus' followers are promised eternal life and will rule and reign with Christ on the renewed earth. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at so far and where we left off. Okay, chapters 4 and 5. The biggest thing here is the record's going to kind of skip a little bit, and we've talked about these 3 dials. If you were here the first week, 3 different genres. That's what makes Revelation unique. So there's apocalyptic genre, a prophetic genre, and a pastoral genre. Excuse me. And at times, the dials of those genres are going to be turned up or turned down. Okay. Tonight, we're going to start to see that the apocalyptic symbol gets turned up a little bit. The pastoral one gets turned up a little bit, and then the prophetic one is going to kind of go down, is what we'll see. But John's going to relocate the audience to heaven, so we're going to see a shift in location here as we go into chapter 4. So chapter 4 starts with John's revelation. He's taken up into heaven. In chapters 4 and 5, we're going to start to see things that may appear strange, right? But what's funny is, this is, in some ways, we tend to very quickly read over stuff like this. Like, how many times do you stop when you're reading the Genesis story and go like, oh, why is there a talking snake? We're so used to like fairy tales and other stuff that we stop to go like, I've never seen a talking snake. Like, snakes don't talk, so maybe the author is trying to say something else here, right? Okay, kind of a quick summary is the primary theme of chapters 4 and 5 is the worship of the Lamb that has been slaughtered. And we're in the heavenly throne room of God, and we're going to see 5 songs that proclaim the Lamb is worthy, God is holy, and God is the Creator. Okay, so let's do this. Any volunteers to read tonight? Anybody that's wishing to read?
I'll go.
Yeah, okay. Read chapter 4 for us.
Okay. After this I looked, and behold, a door standing open in heaven. And the first voice which I had heard speaking to me like a trumpet said, Come up here, and I will show you what must take place after this. At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven, with one seated on the throne. And he who sat there had the appearance of jasper and carnelian. And around the throne was a rainbow that had the appearance of an emerald. Around the throne were 24 thrones, and seated on the thrones were 24 elders, clothed in white garments, with golden crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning and rumblings and peals of thunder. And before the throne were burning 7 torches of fire, which were the 7 spirits of God. And before the throne there, as it were, a sea of glass like crystal. And around the throne, on each side of the throne, are 4 living creatures, full of eyes in front and behind. The first living creature was like a lion, the second living creature like an ox, the third living creature like the face of man, and the fourth living creature like an eagle in flight. And the 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, are full of eyes all around and within, and day and night they never cease to say, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. And whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to him who is seated on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before him who is seated on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They cast their crowns before the throne, saying, Worthy are you, O our Lord our God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created.
Okay, pretty epic scene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Anybody remember the story I told of my professor that was working through the book of Revelation and threw the piece of chalk down that they caught it? You remember that? Okay. This same professor, he was teaching in undergrad on the book of Revelation, and he goes, I may get fired for this, but here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna act this scene out. And so he had a classroom, and we like full on, like somebody was God, somebody was Jesus, like we had the 24 elders, we had like people were bowing down, like it was like, he was like, if somebody walks in right now, they're probably gonna think I'm leading a cult and I'm gonna be fired, right? But it was like, it kind of gave us this realistic, like, wow, this is, this is crazy. So we're gonna start and we're gonna walk through some of this. The throne is a huge theme in the book of Revelation, okay? The throne occurs 47 times in the book. We see this juxtaposition, God's throne in 1:4. If you remember it, when he's talking about the churches, he talks about there's a place where Satan's throne is, right? Anybody remember the connection there, the potential Greek god that he may have been referencing, that temple? There's a temple to Zeus, right? And there was human sacrifice going on all the time. And scholars think that may have been what he was referencing. We're going to see the throne of dragon and beast, characters we've yet to meet yet, in 13:2. Also to the churches, those who are victorious, they get the right to sit on the throne. So we're promised that as well. Team Lamb are around the throne, and we're going to see that the 24 elders were there, and they're seated on thrones as well. They're the 4 living creatures that are around the throne. Those later, at the very end of Revelation, who sit on thrones will be given authority to judge. The one on the throne, in the end, says, Behold, I am making all things new. And spoiler alert, the throne of the beast is going to plunge you'll still be excited when you get there.
We're helping us out again.
This is a very interesting piece that I've kind of traced. I haven't really seen very many people talk about this, but we're going to see as we go along that, and we'll see one instance tonight where I think there are multiple instances as we go along that you can't. I would argue, the more I study it, you can't take this book chronologically. As much as you want to, you can't. I'll give you one piece of evidence for that tonight. Okay. But this is another, I think, piece that is kind of a clue to when this is mentioned. So in 4:5 it says, "From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder." John uses this, I would argue, as a and see, and then he moves on to something else. Okay, and those scenes sometimes overlap, sometimes they circle back. It's not always chronologically, I would argue, and I'll give you some reasons why I think that. We've talked about echoes and archetypes a little bit, right? So a lot of scripture echoes back, and there are archetypal stories that the biblical authors also like appeal back to. Okay, the first time we see lightning and thunder is in the Moses story where Moses meets God on Mount Sinai. And the mountain is where God dwells, right? So we shouldn't be surprised that like we're going to the throne room and we're seeing this as well. Okay, we're going to see lightning and thunder, and it becomes. John likes to do things in like numerical and like sevens, but he also likes to stack things and build, and he also likes to circle back. There's all sorts of patterns that John is going to use. We're going to see another building pattern tonight. In 8:5, we see thunder, rumblings, flashing of lightning, and an earthquake. Then we see lightning, rumbling, peals of thunder, and a severe hailstorm. So we see an addition there. And then we see flashes of lightning, rumblings, peals of thunder, and a severe earthquake. So there's kind of like a building as this goes along. But it's always so as we go through the book, when you hear this, it's both a kind of an and scene, and it's also an appeal back to reminding us where the story is kind of centered around the throne room of God. Most scholars will say that chapters 4 and 5 are the key to understanding the major themes and the plot line of the book of Revelation. And we'll see why here in a second. Okay, so let's jump into some of the craziness. We're introduced to 4 living creatures. Okay, and John uses like and as. So he says it was like a lion, like an ox, like a man, like an eagle. I never noticed this before, actually. I noticed just recently as I was going through this. What does John say about the eyes? Within. Isn't that trippy? Like, how does he know that, like, how would you know, you can't see inside my body, like, how does he know, it's such a strange thing, like, they're covered with eyes, and, oh, by the way, like, within, they're all covered with eyes, too. It's kind of a strange metaphor, right? But the idea is that they're all seeing, they see everything. People have tried to come up with different reasons why the lion, why the ox, why a man, why the eagle. We don't know why. They seem to be like these hybrid, in some sense, part human, part animal, part angelic beings. Again, so part of this is like, how literally do we take this, right? I mean, can you imagine a 6-winged animal covered in eyes and inside and out? And it's interesting, he says one was like a man, right? So typically people will say, well, like the lion is like the epitome of like the predator type of animal. The ox is like the biggest, strongest, like domesticated animal. Man is like the smartest animal, and the eagle represents like the biggest, like best bird type of thing, right? So it's supposed to, in some ways, magnify like God's creation. We see echoes. Well, John is drawing on imagery from both Ezekiel and Isaiah. So someone want to read Ezekiel 1 through 14 for us? We can kind of get an idea of where John's pulling on my phone. Anybody? Ezekiel 1 through 14. And then somebody else want to have the Isaiah text ready? Isaiah 6, 1 through 3. Who's got Ezekiel?
I've got it.
You got it? Okay.
In the 30th year, in the 4th month, on the 5th day of the month, as I was among the exiles by the Chebar canal, the heavens were open, and I saw visions of God. On the 5th day of the month, it was the 5th year of the exile of King Jehoiakim. The word of the Lord came to Ezekiel, and the priest, the son of Buzzah, in the land of the Chaldeans, by the Chebar canal, and the land of the Lord was upon him there. As I looked, behold, a stormy and a wind came out of the north, and a great cloud with brightness around it, and fire flashing forth continually, and in the midst of the fire it was gleaming metal, and from the midst of it came the likeness of 4 living creatures, and this was their appearance. They had a human likeness, but each had 4 faces, and each of them had 4 wings. These legs were straight, and the soles of their feet were like the soles of the calf's foot, and they sparkled like burnished bronze. Under their wings, on their 4 sides, they had human hands, and the 4 had their faces and their wings thus. Their wings touched one another. Each one of them were straight forward, without turning as they went. As for the likeness of their faces, each had a human face. The 4 had the face of a lion on the right side, and the 4 had the face of an ox on the left side, and the 4 had the face of an eagle. Such were their faces, and their wings were spread out above. Each creature had 2 wings, each of which touched the wing of another, while 2 covered their bodies, and each went straight forward. Wherever the Spirit would go, they went, without turning as they went. As for the likeness of the living creatures, their appearance was like burning coals of fire, like the appearance of torches moving to and fro among the living creatures. And the fire was bright, and out of the fire went forth lightning. And the living creatures darted to and fro, like the appearance of flashing lightning.
Okay. And you know Isaiah?
In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with a train of his robe filling the temple. Seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, and with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called out to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, the whole earth is full of his glory.
Okay. Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay. We talked about how John is using tons of Old Testament imagery, right? And there are hyperlinks that go back. Okay, so this is just some of that. It is a little bit interesting that Ezekiel gives them 4 wings, and Isaiah gives them 6. John sides with Isaiah. Maybe Ezekiel missed 2. We don't know. But I mean, just like John is a lot of what he's using his imagery is stock imagery that he's pulling forward. Okay? So what I want to do now is, we haven't got into it yet with chapter 5, but what I want to show you there are 5 different songs in chapters 4 and 5. And what John does is progressively builds the audience. Okay? So song 1 are just the living creatures, and they declare the holiness of God. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. Song 2 is just the elders, but it's a bigger group, and they declare God is worthy. Worthy are you, O Lord and God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things, and by your will they existed and were created. Okay, so the first 2 worship songs are about him who is on the throne. Okay? Then these 2 groups get together in the next song and they sing together. Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals, for you were slain. So this is about the Lamb. And this is going to be in chapter 5, right? Yeah. Okay, so this is, we haven't read through that yet, but this is in chapter 5. So the 2 groups come together and sing, worthy are you to take the scroll and open its seals, for you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on earth. Okay, so some key words here are that he was slain, it was by his blood, that we are a kingdom of priests, and if you were here for our What is Heaven is Like big questions night, you'll remember that one of the things that I argued was that Revelation talks about how God's kingdom, heaven, is coming here, we're not going somewhere else, right? And that's what I believe this text says. Okay, so now we've got the 4 living creatures plus the elders. Now we're going to add a whole bunch of angels. And they sing together, worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. Okay, so song 4, we've got an even bigger choir. And now for song 5, John just throws it out there and says, like, everyone, everyone, everyone. Every creature in heaven and earth and under the earth and in the sea. So he says, like, casts the net all the way. To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. Okay, so see how he just expands the audience, right? So this is one of the places where I would argue that one of the reasons why you can't take the book of Revelation chronologically is in chapter 5 here, we already have all of creation, everybody worshiping God, right? So how is that possible chronologically if we're going to then, if that's not happening now, and then we're going to move into talking about like people that aren't following God, fallen angels, of the beast, of people that won't repent, okay? So that's an argument for that idea. Okay? Let's go to chapter 5. Jen, you want to read chapter 5?
Sure. Except I wasn't on it at all, so just give me a minute. Is this it? Thanks, Rebecca. Then I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" And no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or to look into it. And I began to weep loudly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or to look into it. And one of the elders said to me, "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered, so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals."
Okay, pause right there. I'll come back and have you read the rest of it. We'll pause right Okay? So, one of the recurring themes that we'll also see is John has all sorts of questions that he's going to ask. And he doesn't ask those for his own good, he's asking those for his audience. And the idea is to get us to ask, but the questions he's asking, he wants his audience to ask, right? So, the first one we're introduced to here is, who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? That's one we'll talk about tonight. One we'll talk about next week is, we'll see a group says, how long before you will judge and avenge our blood on those who dwell on the earth? So that's another question he wants his audience to ask. And then also next week we'll ask this question, who can stand on the day of the Lord? In chapter 7, which we'll also look at next week. Who are these clothed in white robes, and from where have they come? Question 5, who is like the beast and who can fight against it? Question 6, who will not fear, O Lord, and glorify your name? Question 7, why do you marvel at the mystery of the woman and the beast? And question 8, what city was like the great city? Okay, so these are questions that John is using to probe his audience and say, hey, these things are important. I'm asking these questions. You should also be asking these questions. So we're going to pay attention to questions as we go along in the book. Okay? So here's the deal. This is probably this section that we're entering into is going to be, I would argue, and I think a lot of other people would argue too, the key to understanding the book of Revelation. And so let me give you my argument for that. Okay, John starts by saying, remember we talked about the difference between hearing and seeing, right? Okay, and what he hears and what he sees are not always the same thing. And the way John uses this is to flip something upside down on its head, and to really to jar you. Okay. So here's what he says: "Weep no more. Behold, the Lion of the tribe of Judah." Okay. In Genesis 49, Judah, the son, is called a lion, and he's actually called like a lion cub, right? But there's this promise that the king. So we're going to see a lion here, okay, from the tribe of Judah. The word Judah, words have specific meanings in Hebrew. The word Judah actually means praise. Okay. We're going to see a lion. He says, I saw a lion from the tribe of Judah, from the root of David. He has conquered. Everybody remember what the Greek word for conquer was? Nike. Okay? And that word is super important in how one conquers, we talked about. Okay? So he has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals. And between the throne and the 4 living creatures, among the elders, I saw a lamb standing, as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God, sent out into all the earth. Okay? So he hears about a lion. What he sees is a lamb. And it's specifically, actually the Greek word is a little lamb. Okay? But this lamb has been slain. But it's standing. Okay, so you see the reversal here. Not only does what he hears about is a lion, and it's reversed into a lamb, but he also sees that it has been slain, but it's standing. This is huge. This is very, very much key. Okay? So one of the things in the Old Testament is the people of God, the Israelites, were often looking for and trying to get God to be a lion. I'm gonna give you a couple examples. Okay? In 1 Samuel 8, 19 through 20, Israel rejects God as their king and asks for a violent lion-like king. So they say, God, you're good and everything, but like, give us an earthly king. And this is what they say. But this is what the text says. But the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel. They said, no, but we are determined to have a king over us, so that we can also be like other nations, and that our king may govern us and go out for us and fight our battles. Okay? So in a sense, they're saying, God, you're not good enough. Give us an earthly king to fight. Okay? King David, who is the most lion-like king in the Old Testament, is interestingly not allowed to build God's temple because he was violent. Scripture says, then King David rose to his feet and said, hear me, my brothers and my people. I have planned to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord, for the footstool of our God, and I made preparations for building, but God said to me, you shall not build a house for my name, for you are a warrior and have shed blood. Okay, so they want an earthly king who is going to shed blood for them. Okay, and here's one of the things, we don't know for sure if David wrote this psalm, but here's what they expected from a Messiah. Right, so the kingdoms separate and fall apart, and they go into exile, and they're expecting a Messiah to come and be a conquering king. In Psalm 110, it says, the Lord is at your right hand. He will shatter kings on the day of his wrath. He will execute judgment among the nations, filling them with corpses. He will shatter heads over the wide earth. Okay, so God's going to come and just kill all the bad guys. Right? One of the biggest mistakes that the disciples made was they were expecting a violent, king-like Messiah who would shed blood, that would turn their enemies into corpses. And when Jesus came, and he didn't do any of that, they didn't understand. They didn't understand how they were constantly asking him, like, when is your kingdom coming? When are we going to overthrow the Roman rule, right? How, like, just tell us when to get swords. And instead, he's like out preaching and turning, like, doing miracles and feeding people and stuff, right? And so that like, they just don't understand what's going on. Okay. This really interesting thing happens in Luke 4, which is also when Jesus reads the text in Isaiah. So Isaiah has this text in Isaiah 61, and it says this: the Spirit of the Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor and the day of vengeance of our God. So they were expecting God to come in vengeance, right? Jesus reads this text from Isaiah. He stops before the day of the vengeance part and just leaves it out completely. And then what the text says is everybody gets pissed off. Well, why did they get pissed off? Because they left out the vengeance part, right? Okay. So let's look at just a couple of examples of, like, I mean, obviously we know, like, Jesus laid down his life. He was crucified. He was mocked as a king, right? He asked his disciples to lay down their lives, but he also, when he was encouraged, when his disciples wanted to use violence, he shut it down. Okay, so when James and John are looking for a lion-like king to call down fire from heaven, this is what happens. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them? But Jesus rebuked them. Or there's the story where Jesus is in the garden and he's getting arrested, and one of his disciples cuts off an ear, right? You guys know that story? And Jesus says, put your sword away. Those who use the sword will die by the sword. And he heals the man's ear. What John is doing is he's basically just bringing the Gospels forward. He's saying that Jesus fights, he conquers, that Greek word, kaio, right? He conquers, but not by fighting, but by laying down his life. He conquers not by shedding other people's blood, but by shedding his own blood. And he was even willing to become a corpse in a tomb.
Excuse me, thank you.
Okay? The problem is that Israel wanted this kind of king, and what they got was this kind of king. Right? And what I'm going to argue is the rest of the book of Revelation, and is that a lot of the reasons why people don't understand the book of Revelation is because they're still looking for this. And John doesn't get, you can find this if you want it, but you can find anything you're looking for. What John is doing is taking these kind of symbols and then turning them into this. He's flipping them upside down. Major reversals. He's going to use, and so the problem is you can read on the surface that this is what's going on, but that's only the surface reading, right? So it's funny because Rebecca was like, "Hey, let's do these songs," and I was laughing because I was like, "Oh, I feel bad because I'm going to ruin these songs for Rebecca now." But what we want is a lion and a lamb. That's what the song says, right? God is a lion and a lamb. That's not what John says. John says he's this. And he's always been this. And we wanted him to be that, and we think he's like that. And he is like that in a way, because he does conquer. But he doesn't conquer like a lion. He conquers like a lion. And if you remember if you were here for the first week, we talked about how you read this book can be a lens. You can read it like a Roman soldier or a Jewish martyr, right? This is part of that filter. You can read it and find ways to make God and Jesus a devouring lion. But you're going to miss what John's trying to do. And we'll see all sorts of different examples, okay? So this is the key text. If you don't understand that what John is doing here, that Jesus is a lamb, and that's how he conquers, then moving through the rest of this book, I would argue you're going to miss it entirely. Okay? Questions so far? No, you want to keep charging along? Everybody good?
Keep charging.
Yeah? Are you with me? Where we're okay? Okay. So we're going to see these type of reversals in all sorts of different ways. This is just one of them. So the angel says, "Look, a lion, he has conquered," Nikaio. Remember the letters to the 7 churches? They all end with, "Those who have ears to hear what the Spirit says to the churches, to those who overcome, here's the promise. To those who conquer," and how do they conquer? They conquer like the lamb. They conquer by following the lamb. And John says, "I saw a slaughtered lamb." So the question is, how is Jesus victorious? How does he conquer? Well, John tells us. He conquers through being slain. Which, for us, is like the biggest, how does that, nobody ever goes into battle as a human and like just lets himself die, and then like they don't like we wouldn't call that person a winner, right? Like they don't win. But the reason he wins is because he's standing, because he's been resurrected, because God is the creator and the sustainer and the redeemer and the restorer of life. And so Satan can throw the biggest weapon at him that he has and just dust it off. That's how. But it's such a mind flip for us to go like, this doesn't make any sense. Like why? Like how can you conquer in this way? But when you basically show your enemy's biggest weapon to be nothing, it's like, what else you got, right? Okay. If you remember at the end of all the seven churches, he talked about this same phrase. We'll see it again in 21:7 at the end, to him who overcomes. And overcome, conquer are generally the two words that are translated from Nikao. We see that here, the lamb that was slaughtered. And we're going to see that pop up later in the martyrs conquer by the blood of the lamb. Right? So we conquer by following the lamb, and he conquers by laying his life down. And we're called to also follow and lay our lives down.
David, so the lamb that was slaughtered is representative of Jesus being crucified on the cross?
Right. So we'll see later in the book that there's conquering going on between the 144,000 and the beast. The 144,000 is representative of the Lamb's army, and we'll see who the beast is when we get there. We'll also see that the beast conquers on the white horse. The beast conquers with 2 witnesses, and in 13:7 the beast conquers the saints. So there's a difference in the way the beast conquers and the lamb conquers. The beast conquers like a lion, right? There's so much here. Like I was telling my dad when he came in, he was like, how do you think it's going to go tonight? I'm like, it's hard because there's so much that I'm still holding on to that I'm reading and working ahead of you guys. So I'm trying to decide how much to pull in and how much to wait for following weeks. So I'm struggling with like how much of that to go into. The lamb is the way that John talks about Jesus. Okay, it occurs 29 times in the book, and they're all referencing Jesus. He says the lamb that has been slaughtered but is standing, right? Reversal. Lion, lamb, slaughtered, standing. And here John combines the themes of death and resurrection. He says, we're talking about pumping up the symbolism and the apocalyptic. He says, John's favorite number, he's got 7 horns. Okay, most people think that's representative of power. And 7 eyes, which are the spirits of God. And eyes most likely representing knowledge. The other theme that we see here is blood, and this is going to run all throughout the book as well. Blood is arguably people would say like this is the bloodiest book in the Bible, potentially. But the interesting thing is that the blood that's being spilled is always the martyr's blood, or the lamb's blood. It's not Jesus' enemies who are bleeding. In Leviticus 17:11, it says that the life of the flesh is in the blood, and Jesus' followers are released from sin by Jesus' blood. Jesus' followers are ransomed by the blood of the Lamb. And next week we'll see that one of those first questions: how long until you avenge our blood? This will be something that we'll look at next week as well. But Genesis 14:10, when Cain kills Abel, God says, "Your brother's blood is crying out to me from the ground." And so there's this question of like, how will God ultimately deal with evil? And again, these are reversals that we'll look at later on, but I just want to give them to you here since they're related to the topic. Jesus' followers are made white in the blood of the Lamb. How does that work? Right? It's a reversal. Jesus' followers conquer by the blood of the Lamb. They conquer by the death of their leader, and then by following him to death. Sorry, more blood slides. You're welcome? I don't know. So we're also going to see a theme of drinking blood. And this is an interesting theme because it kind of highlights this idea that violence beget violence, and those who use the sword die by the sword. And it's this idea in the Bible that evil is like a boomerang. And when it goes out, it's always going to come back and destroy the person that's using it, right? And in some ways, like, God doesn't have to do anything at all. Like, it's just going to. So we see that the beast worshippers drink the blood of the saints. The woman, there's a woman drunk with blood of the saints and the witnesses in Babylon, which is going to be the counter city to Jerusalem, has found the blood of the saints. And then we're going to see other reversals, like God judges the whore and avenges the blood of his servants. Jesus enters battle. He enters battle already drenched in his own blood. Right? Yeah. So I mean, who enters battle already drenched in blood? So what John is saying is he's already fought, but he's fought by dying. Okay. And then let's go and read. Let's pick up from Lion and the Lamb.
Yeah, you kind of stole a little bit of it though. You started reading. I was on verse 6.
Okay, go from verse 6.
And between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as though it had been slain, with 7 horns and with 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. And he went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who was seated on the throne. And when he had taken the scroll, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb, each holding a harp and golden bowls full of bowls. My bad. Sorry. Bowls. Full of incense, which are the prayers of the saints. And they sang a new song, saying, Worthy are you to take the scroll and to open its seals. For you were slain, and by your blood you ransomed people for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have made them a kingdom and priests to our God, and they shall reign on the earth. Then I looked, and I heard around the throne and the living creatures and the elders the voice of many angels, numbering myriads of myriads and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and might and honor and glory and blessing. And I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and in the sea and all that is in them, saying, To him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. And the 4 living creatures said, Amen. And the elders fell down and worshipped. I'm really sorry that I said bowels. That was my favorite part. As I said it, I was like, it can't be bowels. And I teach English. Bowls. It's the only thing they're going to remember from that chapter now. I'm so sorry. Sorry.
That's okay, it's all about the golden vowels.
Golden bells.
This isn't even spelled like that. It's like B-O-W.
Okay, so
E-L-U-S.
we see that God is interested in making a kingdom of priests on earth. If we rewind back to chapter 1, Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn of the dead, and the rulers of the kings of the earth. In this chapter we see, you made them to be a kingdom of priests serving our God, and they will reign on earth. And in chapter 20, we will see they will be priests of God and of Christ, and they will reign with him. And at that point we see God's kingdom coming to earth. So if you missed that, the night where we talked about what is heaven like, one of the things that I pointed out in the book of Revelation, and a lot of other scholars argue, is that we have this popular cultural idea that like we die and we're going somewhere else. But really the biblical view is that we die, Christ comes back, resurrects us, and God restores and recreates and fixes creation. God doesn't just abandon and trash what he creates, he restores and renews. Okay? So let's do a summary of these two chapters, and then we'll talk about a couple of things. So if we're going to summarize, the Lamb is on the throne and worthy of our worship. We're going to see later that there's also a dragon who is seeking his throne and seeking his worship. The Lamb, the way of the Lamb is to lay down your life, and we're going to see as we move forward that the way of the dragon is to take others' lives. Number 3, God's saints from every tribe and nation will be a kingdom of priests and will reign with him on earth. Okay? As we move forward into the following weeks, of course, John's favorite number is 7, so we're going to see some cycles of 7. So we have this scroll, and it's got 7 seals on it, right? And so we're going to see this slowly unfold and roll out. And so we're going to see 7 seals, then we're going to see 7 trumpets, then we're going to see 7 signs. These will be all 3 different weeks. And then we'll get into then we'll get into the secret 7 vowels.
Stop! I'm never going to live it down.
We'll all sit on our thrones. I think after that, we will get into, I think that's chapter 12, which is where we get into, did you know that there was a dragon at Christmas? No? Nobody told you that? No? Okay. Chapter 12, we'll see the backstory
Jesus,
of
there was a dragon.
the
Is that what he's
birth
talking
narratives of Christ, and we'll get to see the fact that there's a dragon on Christmas Day.
On the day Jesus was born, there was a dragon.
Behind the scenes, we get to see all sorts of behind the scenes.
I feel like you could tell us anything right now, and we would be like, oh, because we're just like, we believe everything you're saying.
And this is how culture If you read the book, you can help fact check me.
I did look up a couple of the verses that you have on the side there, just to double check.
Make sure.
We were there.
Yeah, I will. We'll get there, but that's a fun one to look forward to. There was a dragon that we don't talk about on Christmas Day. Okay, so a couple things as we move forward here. I'll just give you a little preview. Couple of things as we move forward here. One is to remember, we talked about angel means messenger, right? Okay, so there can be both, right? So there can be both good and bad. Okay. And we'll see in that chapter 12, that Satan was an angel, and he took a third of the angels from heaven to earth with him. Okay? So the key here is when something, as we go through these next several weeks, when something happens with an angel, don't it's very easy in our heads to think of like angel, good, oh, this is like something. So you have to let the scene play out to know, like, is this a good angel? Is this a bad angel? Like, and just because John is describing something doesn't mean that God is endorsing what's necessarily going on. It's just descriptive of what's happened. Does that make sense? Okay. We're going to see a pattern emerge. Can you see that? This is a little, what we're going to see is there's 7 seals, 7 trumpets, 7 signs, 7 bowls, okay? And there's this pattern that emerges that's interesting. The first 4 of all of these are going to talk about like cosmic battle and destruction. And we're going to see, almost in a sense, it go down to like 4, 3, 2, and 1. So here, a 4th of the earth is destroyed. A 1/3 of the earth is destroyed. Here, John doesn't say half, but he presents you a choice between the lamb and the beast. And then, like, everything is destroyed. So it kind of goes 4, 3, 2, 1. This is why this book is just crazy to study. There's so many different patterns. In the 5th section of each of these, we're going to see description either of the Lamb's army or Satan's army, and John alternates these, so Lamb, Satan, okay? In 6, we're going to see the day of the Lord. There's going to be judgment, okay? And then in the 7th of each of these, there's going to be what we talked about earlier, thunder, lightning, earthquake, and there's also going to be worship scenes, and there's going to be silence. So some people have argued or have proposed that these are 4 different things just seen from 4 different perspectives, almost like we have 4 different gospels. It could be that it's chronological, and or it could be that these 2 overlap and describe these 2, right? You kind of have to make your own judgment of it. But what I would argue is we're going to see different, like we just saw before this, that like all of creation is worshiping, and that kind of keys you into like, oh, like maybe this isn't chronological. There's also going to be times described where like it's like everybody is destroyed, and then like a chapter or 2 later, like suddenly they're back alive, and it's like, oh, then they're destroyed again. So that kind of leads you to go like, maybe this isn't chronological. And then even at the end, the very end, we see the city, and the gates are open, and then there's all of the evil people have been destroyed, but then it's like, oh, and outside the gates are these like evil people. So it's like, wait, I thought they were all destroyed. So we're going to see some instances that I'll show you. I'll kind of tag along the way that go like this. I would argue that it's hard to take this book chronologically. Okay, so here's.
It's almost like John was overwhelmed by this total great big vision, and he's trying to write it all down. And he's going, oh yeah, and then, oh yeah, now I remember there was this, and then there was this. Because there was so much that was so overwhelming, and he's just trying to capture it all.
Right. We got some time for thoughts, questions, dialogue, discussion.
Well, I have a question. This is our first time here, so we didn't hear the part about heaven was going to be here on earth and not up there somewhere.
Right.
So what happens when I die? Am I going up or down or what?
That was a great Sunday.
I thought the building as a home to go to, and if we're there, you know, on earth already, I'm confused about that.
Right. So we've spent like entire nights discussing some of those issues. One of the issues we talked about what is heaven going to be like? Is it going to be up there, down here? Another night for like life's big questions, which we talked about what happens after you die. So those are like big like whole night discussions. I can give you
Condensed?
What's that?
Condensed.
Yeah, I can give you a quick condensed,
Reader's Digest.
yeah, okay, I mean, so, if you're, I would say this is so hard to do this condensed.
Is your teachings on video or something?
No, we didn't get this. So some Christians would, so there's different views within like the Christian family, right? Some would say that when you die, you're dead, and there's nothing until you're resurrected. But you are resurrected, so when you die, you decompose. God is going to take that, whatever, the dust, and put you back together again. So that's one view. Another view is what's called soul sleep. So you die and you go to dust, but you have something that is still like you, but it lays dormant, so you're not conscious at all. And then God like awakens that and resurrects you. And then the third view would be that something of you, if there is that, goes to be with God, and then that kind of splintered off into different views. Like if you're Catholic, then you believe in purgatory. If you're evangelical, then you believe that you're going to go and be with God in heaven. And then some people would say like, oh, you just go up to be with God and then you're there forever. But then that has a hard time reconciling like how does resurrection fit into that. So some people will like just kind of ditch resurrection altogether. Some people will say that like that soul goes up to heaven and then comes back down into the body, and then you're with God on earth. And then some people will say like the soul goes up to heaven, comes back down, resurrected, and then goes back up to heaven. So there's multiple different views.
You get it?
She's like, where am I going?
Maybe I shouldn't have asked the question.
No, it's okay. We'll actually get into some of that a little bit more next week, because there's a text that has been used to argue for one of the views, and so I'll get into a little bit of that next week.
The slide that you had up there, the chart with all of the colors on it, are you using that?
That is top secret. I can't believe I can show you that. It's something that I've been working on that I'm kind of like, oh, like I've noticed this, and I've never seen anybody else like do this before. It's still something that's.
If you want to write a book later, then.
It's still something that I'm like kind of. I'm not like 100% on, but I think it's got some validity to it. So I might kind of flash that there every once in a while. But, right. Yeah, I'll probably give it to you. I just want to know a little more.
Yep.
Probably not, he probably would.
Right.
Probably would.
No, it's not. I'm not.
Picture of that one.
Next week, no phones allowed.
Actually, I'll get it to you guys, and then you can poke holes in it and tell me where I'm wrong.
I think I can see my human nature and all this stuff, because I want God to be a lion so bad. And I always push for it, and I always look for it, but when it all comes down, I'm very, very grateful that here's the lion. And it's like,
Yeah, they're human
because
nature.
if he was
we
a
want
lion,
vengeance, right?
I'd be dead.
Yeah.
They'd
Yeah.
have no grace.
Yeah, and
I like
if he was
this
a
one.
lion, it would be
Whatever.
different than us. He would just be like the pinnacle of like what we think we can achieve on our own.
You would be so quick to forgive.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go back and then use that filter to read the Gospels, then it helps you understand the disciples so much more and have grace for them.
Absolutely.
You know, like they're like, oh, we want this lion Messiah, and that's what they. I mean, that's what they expected. That's what Israel thought was coming. And it's interesting when you go back and read the Old Testament. There's these threads that like juxtapose each other, right? That are like because you have stuff in Isaiah where it's like he's actually going to be the suffering servant, and he's going to. So there's like these contradictory themes of like what the Messiah is going to be like throughout the Old Testament. And one is saying like, oh, he's going to be this lion, and one is saying, no, he's going to be the lamb. But the lamb is very like this subversive, like undercurrent type of thing, and it's like this. But then the problem is we get to like, so there are these two currents that are running, right, of like lion, and lamb. And then when they meet here with Jesus, everybody's like, hooray, yes, he's the lamb, he died. Okay, but then when we fast forward to Revelation, all of the Christians go, bring on the lion. Right? Case in point. Forgot to read this quote. Okay, if you just like YouTube search like Lion and Lamb, this is one of the first videos that come up. This is Pastor Mark Driscoll. He pastored like this huge mega church, had this huge falling out, failure, and then now he's pastoring again. And here's one of the things that he has said. He says that Jesus is both lion and lamb. Like the songs that we see, this is why I have a hard time singing songs, is because oftentimes songwriters are not theologians. And so like I struggle as a theologian going like, what? No.
While you're singing it.
Yes, like literally while I'm singing this
That's why
song.
he bailed on me
Why
at
am
the end
I
of the song.
singing this? It's
Next
not
week,
right.
it's not going to be the lion and the lamb. It's going to be something else. He's going to.
The struggle is real. Okay, so this is what he says.
Only for him.
In Revelation, the last book of the New Testament, Jesus is a prize fighter with a tattoo down his leg, a sword in his hand, and a commitment to make someone bleed. That is the guy I can worship. I cannot worship the hippie, diapered halo Christ because I cannot worship a guy I can beat up.
What in the world? And his church fell apart.
That's what he says. He's like, I can't worship a lamb, I have to worship a lion. Right?
Mars Hill.
But he's not, I mean, like, he's not alone, you guys. There's, I mean, I would say the majority of the people that read Revelation read it through the lion filter. Despite the fact that Jesus was the lamb in the Gospels. And here's why, okay,
Which is every reason that we're saved. Because he's alive.
right.
But I think it's also the reason that people are following it in the church. So many Christians have that God's gonna spite you attitude.
Right.
And that's not true.
And we'll get into this next week because we'll see that question come up of like, God, when will you avenge us? When will you bring vengeance? Right? When will you return evil for evil? When will you destroy your enemies? There's I can't remember what psalm it is now. We'll talk about it next week. But this was a common theme throughout Israel, and it's still a common theme in the church. There's a psalm that talks about how the Israelites have been conquered by Babylon, and they're saying, like, look, it was, I think Bob Marley maybe the favorite song, by the rivers of Babylon, there we wept. As we remembered Zion, how can we sing a song like of joy in the midst of our conquerors, right? That psalm ends with, and joyful is the one who's like God comes and takes their enemies' babies and dashes their heads with rocks.
Oh my God.
I mean, but that's what people want from the Lion Jesus.
When I see the words lion and lamb, just in generalities, to me that's just a label. It's not so much what you're called as it is what the ultimate outcome is. If you're talking about winning, the lion is the winner and the lamb is the loser.
Right.
It's not so much what rounds you won or lost, it's who won at the end. The end is the resurrection.
Right.
So that's how I look. I mean, we have a tendency as humans to label everything. And it's just a word,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned. What do they stand for? What's gonna happen to that ultimately? Whether you're a lion/lamb, or whether you're just a lion, or whether you're a lamb, to me, all you're doing is describing or labeling some kind of, whatever you wanna call it.
Right, but it gets at, like,
So what's associated with lamb is not associated with a lion.
right.
If you, I mean, if you really believe.
Yeah, I mean, but there, you know, some of the biggest questions we have as humans and as people who believe in God are, is God just? How is God gonna deal with evil? Why is there evil, right? So this gets at like some of those like really, really big questions of like, and our human tendency to solve problems is to meet violence with violence.
Yeah, using our own reasoning.
Right. I mean, you know, and we lack the imagination to go like, how can somebody, like, the person who dies is a loser, obviously. Like how does that make any sense that the person who dies is the winner?
But you're not looking at the ultimate outcome.
Right.
I'm saying.
Right.
Yeah. Who's the winner between the tortoise and the hare? I mean, I can sit there and cite all kinds of examples like that.
Right.
The one that doesn't get money.
Yeah. Yeah, this is, I mean, this is the key to the book.
But what I wanna know is what happens when you pass. I know there's a time lapse, we're on a different timetable. Where does our soul go? Does it stay down there or does it come back down?
That was a great Sunday night.
Because when we go to, in our, well, as I grew up, the soul went up to heaven. Doesn't mean there's not a resurrection. How that happens.
Right.
I like kind of what you and Scott concluded. I mean, there's all sorts of different thoughts on it, but when the reality is because we have time and God does not have time the same we do, to us it's gonna be nearly instant.
Right, the timing is completely different there.
Yeah, I mean, so the reason why this gets so complicated is the initial question first is, do I have a soul?
I hope so.
And there's disagreement about that.
Not
It's,
in my
well,
ear.
within the Christian community there is. So we'll talk some about that next week. Because in chapter 6,
Or does it happen so quickly because the difference in the timetable, it doesn't really matter? Is that what we're trying to say?
yeah, it depends on
At the
the,
point, at the time of resurrection. It's, you know, our timetable is completely different.
it could be that. That's one of the ways that people solve the calls.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know the difference of a human being.
Right.
So when you
Not
get
even
angry, are you a lion?
Okay, so this is very interesting. We're gonna work through this. This is one of those things where there's
Oh, you can tell us, come on.
we have
No,
1 minute.
he hardly gets angry.
Okay,
In the temple.
this is like this kind of stuff keeps me up at night, you guys.
Yeah.
You can ask my wife. Okay.
There's nights I roll over and I'm all, where is he? He's like downstairs in the office, you know, lights
Greek
on.
word for wrath or anger is orge. Okay?
Organ?
Orge.
Oh, organ.
Scott used, if anybody was paying attention to me on my phone, they probably thought I was like playing games or something like that this morning, but I was looking, actually, one of the things I was doing was looking up, it was in the sermon that Scott preached this morning. It said, basically, it was along the list of like things not to have, like, one of the things was don't have orge, which is, was translated as anger. Every time this word is used in the New Testament, in reference to people like us, it says, don't have this at all. You don't know how to have this and handle this emotion. You don't know how to have wrath or anger. For some reason, when it speaks of God, it's attributed to God as something that he can have, but it's only because he knows how to handle it correctly. Okay?
Do they use the same word?
Same word. Yep. But we'll see so next week.
Because our little intellect can't handle that kind of power.
In April. Okay. Next week we will see in the sixth seal. So this is chapter 6, verse 16. The people say, they will fall on us and hide us from the face of him who is seated on the throne and from the wrath, the orge, of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, who can stand? We'll get into that question, right? So, the Lamb is going to have this. The dragon is also going to have this. The question is, what do they do with it? Humans are saying, like, don't have this, don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. You guys don't know how to, like, have that. Like, it always ends up wrong.
Somebody always gets hurt.
Yeah. If I convince you there, you have to come next week. Any other? I know we're ending on time, so I want to respect time, but I'm also like I'm totally open if people have questions and want to continue.
I've got another theological question.
Sure.
Somehow I got committed to all
Like in chapters 2
Somehow.
2 and 3,
Day before my
it's
birthday,
like
I was in Texas too.
pep talks and scolding to the different churches. And then apparently the book of Revelation continues. Is this like one big letter from John to the churches? Or was it just pep talks there in 2 and 3, do we know? Or was this a big, like a thesis of sorts that was sent to the churches all at one time, or is this a series of
So it was
to the church?
so it was sent to the churches as a whole piece. Some scholars think that because it was written to all 7, it was meant for all of them to be read, and it happens within like the mailing route. And there's all sorts of debate about whether Revelation is supposed to be read chronologically, or whether it's like cyclical, like I had said, whether he's having multiple visions and it's kind of like and scene, and then like there's another scene, and that scene could be a prequel or a sequel, or so there's lots of debate on that. But as far as the composition of the letter, it was all written in one piece and sent out as like together.
Was it the same letter to all of the churches?
Yeah, so he addresses this, like, this is it, right? And so there's a specific, like, address to each of those 7 churches within here, so they each would have read what John had said to each of the individual churches.
How long did it take him to write it? Can anyone tell?
Your guess is as good as mine. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it is like, it's the most complex book, I think probably at least in the New Testament, arguably in the New Testament. But it's also unique in that we don't have another book like that in its time frame that has all 3 different genres of letter, prophecy, and apocalypse. Yeah. All right. Everybody's brain hurt for the night? Yeah. Well, this is the centering 2 chapters that we always need to come back to is The Lamb is on the throne. He's worthy of worship. And he's the Lamb that has been slain. Right? And that's kind of the centering where we come back to every time. All right? Pretty great. Hope to see you guys next week. Thanks for coming. Thanks for worshiping.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.
Questions? If you have like questions and want to email me or text me or just go out to lunch, I would love that.
Is he buying?
Just let me know.
Depends on how many people want to go out to lunch. Bring your own.
Oh, yeah.